There's 5 main steps to making atmospheric drum and bass. Step 1, we need to find a driving sample. The first thing you need to do when you're making a track is decide on the vibe you're going for. And I like to categorize it into 2 separate ways. We've got the emotional melodic side of drum and bass, and then we've got the eerie dark side of drum and bass. So let's look at dark, eerie drum and bass first. Now, one way to find your core driving sample is to use pads. And I've got an example here. So what I use are these things called Rompler synths. And these are synths that use live audio. And I just find these to be more powerful when you're creating instruments. So I've got Nexus 4 open here, and I've got a chord selected. And I just searched around until I found like a really eerie one, and then I made a progression in D minor, and it sounds like this. And that sounds really awesome, really eerie, really spooky, really atmospheric for this kind of drum and bass. And that's my core driving sample. Now, if you don't have Nexus 4, I recommend looking into getting something like this, because then you can create your own sounds, or you can just look on Splice for these kind of sounds and do some digging and see what kind of samples you can find. And then what I normally do is I'll always have 16-bar intro where it just stays the same, and then we'll have a breakdown and a build-up for the next 16 bars, or you might just have a build-up for 8 bars, depending on your track. And this is where you have to turn this pad into, especially on the build-up here, you need to turn this pad into a sustained sound in D, which is on D minor, and then we can either slowly fade this sound out whilst the build-up happens, or turn it into a riser. Now, if you want to see the full video on this particular track, I've broken it down. I'll leave a link. It's the How to Atmos video. Now, for example 2, this is also an eerie sound, but I've used a more energetic core driving sample. And this is a horn. So instead of like a sustained sound, we've got like a short stabby sound. And this sounds like this. So instead of like a chord progression, we're creating like a melody progression, and this just sounds really awesome. Now, if you want to see the full breakdown for this example, this is the How to Teddy Killers video. I'll leave a link to that down below. And then finally, for example 3, the last 2 were atmospheric style, and then this is the more melodic side of drum and bass. And in this scenario, you might want to use a chord progression, and this is what a chord progression might sound like. And if you want to learn how to make the full progression for this kind of music, there's my emotional chords video down below. I'll leave a link to that as well. In step 2, we need to find additional instruments that can support our driving sample. And this can be through new instruments or layered instruments. And example 1, I actually do layer this pad with another pad, as you can see down here. So I've just got a second pad from Nexus 4 and layered it in exactly the same melody. So if we play it, you can just hear that builds up on it. Now, feel free to add as many layers as you want. Just make sure it sounds better each time you add a new layer. Get creative with it. And then other ways to add more instruments would be to add counter melodies. So for example, in the more chord progression style track, you could add like an ARP as a counter melody. Sounds like this. And you can also see that we've layered this like crazy as well. So there's a respace underneath, and then there's all these other chords as well. In step 3, we need to decide whether or not we add drums. And then we need to progress these drums in the build-up as well. So once you've got your core instrument down and you've got the supporting instruments around it, layers, counter melodies, you then need to decide whether to have drums or not in your intro. And the best way to add drums is literally just to focus on the hi-hats and percussion in the intro, or these atmospheric type. And what I always like to do is I'll either add nothing at all, or I'll add drums that sound a bit like this. And these will continue for the whole of the first 16 bars. And then I'll basically just take elements from the drop, add these back in, add some build-up elements in, and then slowly transition it into a build-up before having like a pre-drop here for the last bar, and then it goes into the drop. And I'll typically follow the same formula for all my tracks. So you can see another example here, first 16 bars. And then after the 16 bars, we introduce elements in, and then go into a bull build up, and then a gap 1 bar before the drop. And again, you can see here, this is a slightly different one because we have like a pre-intro bit for 8 bars, but when everything does come in, it's all playing the same sort of style. It's just a few more little elements going on here. But you can hear it's very focused on the high EQ scale of hi-hats and percussion elements, just giving nice groove behind the eerie atmospheric elements. And also in my new drum and bass dance floor pack, I have got loads of these intro hat loops here, all taken from some of my best tracks. Just so you can literally just drag them in and drop them, and then you'll have an intro ready to go without having to mess about. And there's currently a beta pack for that pack, first link down below. Or if you're watching this in the future, it might be out, so make sure to grab that. The Dance Floor DnB sample pack, first link down below. In step 4, we need to look at adding vocals, particularly vocal effects, so vocal atmospheres. And these are like long, typically one note sounding effects. And then there's other things like ad-libs as well, and then adding delay and reverb to these to get them to sound even more atmospheric. So the next thing you want to do is add vocal atmos to your tracks. Now if you're doing an eerie sounding track, you can use like weird effects with loads of reverb and delay on. For example, in this one I've got a laugh. So let me just play this for you. And it's got a load of reverb on and a load of delay on, and that just makes it sound really cool. And then other ways to do this is to use vocal atmospheres, and these are normally like long one note harmonies, and you can normally find some really good ones on Splice. So for example, you just type in vocal atmospheres, so this one here. You hear how they're like sustained sounds, and you can get creative with them, put them in the background, EQ them, make sure they're in the right key, of course. And then also for eerie stuff, here's another example. And then before the drop, just adding some nice elements in there. And then of course for more melodic style, you might want to find like a vocal hook, ad-libs to go with the vocals, and then you can put that vocal atmosphere underneath that to add even more layer and depth to the track. Step 5 is all about effects, adding atmospheres, adding white noise, adding sweeps, down filters, impacts, adding risers before the drop. So you've got your main driving sample, you've got your drums, you've got a vocal and some vocal atmos, but now you really need to take it to the next level with effects. So what I recommend you do is get all the basic ones in, so your white noise, and these can be in the form of like anything really, like rain, bird sounds, general white noise sounds, anything you can think of that's like a sustained noise in the background, even like a crowd sound, for example, or like people chatting. Literally, there's so many different things you can choose from. So get some of them in, then get your generic sweeps in between sections. So every 8 bars or every 16 bars, you'll have some sort of sweep and down filter. And a lot of my sample packs just have these full effects loops. So you can literally just drag them in and then it'll have them all in for you. But if you don't have that, then just look for risers, down filters, and impacts as well. Impacts are really good for when the breakdown happens here, as you can see here. Here in the background there. And then of course risers in the build up, you need lots of risers. I like to layer my risers, you can see. And then you want atmos sounds as well. So these are like sustained one note atmospheres, and they normally sound something like this, or like this. Now all my sample packs have loads of atmos in, and Splice has quite a lot in as well, so you can normally find some good ones on there. And then once you've got all that in, you need to then think outside the box and see how you can add other sounds in. And this is where I like to use Splice along with Splice Bridge. If you don't know how to set that up, it's just in the apps and plugins section. So you can just install it here, and then you add Splice into one of the channels. So I've got it in channel 65 here, and then it connects. And because there's just so many sounds on Splice, it just makes it easier because you can just like go through so many weird sounds. I can type in like eerie, Atmos, just as an example, put this to like random, and then just play my track and go through and listen to loads of different things, and then drag in what I think will work and just play around with ideas. And you can see from this first eerie Atmos track, I've got like a whispering sound in. I've got like this weird sound in. I've got like this weird sound in here, which I've turned into a riser. Got like this riser here. I've got like weird effects, Atmos drums. You need like wind sounds. There's just so much you got to try and do. And then I'll show you a second example where it gets even crazier. So for this example too, the one with the horn. So you can see on top of all the drums, the vocals, the layers on the horns, and the generic risers and down filters of the effects, I've then gone deeper into it and found these weird effects that make the track just sound more full and more eerie and more atmospheric. So we got this one, which was like a pulse style bass that had like some crazy loop that I just cut down to this one bit. And then we found this crazy soundscape texture. If you were to hear that on your own, you wouldn't think of anything, but when you put it all together, listen to how good it sounds. And then we extend it more here with this, more tension, this as well. So when it moves into this section, so it's just about getting all the basics down and then searching for these unique textures and soundscapes to just bring it to the next level. And then we also got this quite unique intro as well, where it's just two sounds from Splice that I'd spent ages looking for. So I hope that provides some insight into how I make my atmospheric and also my melodic style intros and then turn it into a crazy track. It's definitely one of the hardest parts of drum and bass to learn because there's just so many different ways of creating. If you use this 5-step framework, this should at least give you a way to work through it, and then just keep repeating this process and eventually you'll get good at it and start picking out the right samples, and your tracks will just start to sound way better. Now, if you found some value from this video, please make sure to subscribe and turn the notification bell on as well. And also make sure to hit that like button. Really appreciate that. And if you've got any video suggestions, please leave them down below. Any questions as well, I'll answer them all. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.